Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. And we have a special guest. We have Katie Nall with us, and she is a Ph.D. and she creates long-lasting change in the lives of the people in her audience. She's a sought-after speaker for colleges and universities and nonprofits and private events. She brings to the table an interesting technique that we're going to talk about today. So let me say welcome, Katie. Thank you for coming on the show with me.
Oh, Cheryl, thank you so much. I think what you're doing for coaches, regardless of their level, is just so amazing.
Oh, thank you. So tell me a little bit more about yourself. I just kind of give a little brief description there.
Sure. So I live in Florida, and I am a mathematician. My undergraduate degrees are in math and computer science. My master's is in statistics, and my PhD is in math education. As an adult student, I went back to school to fulfill a life dream, and that was to earn my PhD. And what I wanted to do, Cheryl, is help students who needed one class left before they could graduate. Can you guess what that one class was?
Math.
Math. And they would come into my office and they say, okay, well, so how do I get around this? I could have made a fortune by taking everyone else's final exams, but I couldn't do that. So instead, I was looking for a way to help them get over their fear and anxiety about math. So in 2010, while I was finishing up my dissertation, I ran into Nick Ortner's Tapping Summit. And I watched it for 10 days and bought the book, bought the DVD, and said, I have no idea if this is going to work or not. So I had willing victims, students who came in, and I said, hey, let's try that. Well, they were all desperate. And as you know, Cheryl, desperate clients are the best because they will try anything. So they came in, and one by one, we would try this tapping thing, which I look forward to trying out with you today. And as they did it, they would come back and they say, Dr. Nall, I can't believe it. I got an A in math. I've never gotten an A in math. And Dr. Nall, I got 100% on my test. And then there was Scott. Scott was as tall as the door and as wide as the door. And he stood at the door one day and he said, Dr. Nall. And I was like, what? What do you want, Scott? What did I do wrong? And he came and he swooped me up in his arms and he said, if it hadn't been for you and that voodoo stuff, I never would have gotten my bachelor's degree. So we got a lot of students through with math and test phobia. As a result, I did do a TEDx talk. It's got almost 50,000 views now. And through that, I've been able to help students. I actually have clients worldwide. Tomorrow I'll be working with my Belgium student who's attending a boarding school in Switzerland. And I have students in Canada and India, all over the world that I work with. But as it turns out, these techniques that help students overcome their math and fear phobia can actually help your population, the coaches. Some of your coaches may have what we call the imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so we can do an example of tapping on the imposter syndrome because, right, we all have that little doubt, that little fear. So what I tell people is I'm a Florida mathematician who helps people dissolve their waffles, dissolve their worries, anxiety, fear, frustration, lethargy, exhaustion, and stress.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, turns out Dr. Hans Seeley over 100 years ago had defined stress as a result of uncertainty, lack of information, and loss of control. I don't know about you, Cheryl, but right now I'm feeling all of that.
Oh yeah, definitely, especially in this time.
Right? And so I've been able to help students and coaches and people all over the world, helping them overcome those feelings. And it has been very, very rewarding.
Awesome. That sounds so great. What are some kind of surprising results that you got out of it besides that initial?
So, Cheryl, after I did the initial, I did that for a couple of years and I thought, I really don't have any idea what I'm doing. Maybe I should get trained. So I went and I got my certification in level 1, level 2, level 3, trauma and quantum. And as it turned out, I had no idea what I was doing, and it was still working. So I thought, let's go try this. So I have one client in particular I enjoy talking about. She's a chiropractor, and she came to me because she said she's having problems writing these reports. Well, the reports that she had to write were pretty important because she had to write the reports on her patients to be able to get paid. If the reports aren't getting written, she's not getting paid. So she came in to see me, and she kind of came in like this, and she had her left hand on the left area of her lower back. And she said, I'm just not getting these reports done. I need to tap on this. And I said, okay, that's fine. We did an intake form and went through everything. So, part of what I do as a practitioner is ask a lot of questions. And so asking questions about, when did this start and what do you remember? Well, it turns out in 5th grade, she remembered not being good in writing essays. And I said, let's tap on that. So we tapped on that. But part of what you do in tapping is say, where do you feel it in your body? Well, she kept referencing that part in her lower back. And it was like a stabbing kind of pain. And whenever she thought about these reports, it just wasn't going away. So we tapped on that for a while. Nothing was happening. So Cheryl, I said, let's try a little quantum tapping. And that's using past lives. And so we did some past life regression and worked on what was going on. And it turned out she remembered being stabbed fatally in the back. And every time she thought about those reports, that wound from a past life was triggering. So we cleared it. And in 1 week, she was able to finish those 46 reports. And now she finishes the reports easily every day.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Is that crazy?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So can you give us a brief kind of, before we actually do it, can you give us a brief synopsis of how it works?
Sure. So Gary Craig is the designer of this, and he's an electrical engineer from Stanford University. And what he was doing was observing psychologists and psychiatrists who were using traditional Chinese medicine, the meridians or energy flows through our system, and being able to do, if you did just this, this would help with anxiety. If you did just this, this would help with worry. If you did just this, this would help with fears. And so all of these psychologists and psychiatrists had different things that they would do for all these different ailments. Well, Gary's kind of looking at all of this and through his electrical engineer mind and putting them all together and realizing that if you tapped on these certain points on your body, there's about 8 different points on your body. And if you tap on them, that you actually are triggering about 98% of all of those disparate points. And clinical studies have shown, they've done so many studies, Cheryl, from around the world. And they found that clinical studies have shown that tapping alone does relieve, but when you add the words to it, and here's the crazy part, you add negative words to it. Now, all our lives, Cheryl, we've been told what?
Be
positive. Yeah. And I'll tell you, my hardest client was when I asked my husband to be the first example. So I sat him down on the couch. And I said, okay, honey, come here. I want you to sit down, and I want you to tell me how negative you feel right now. And he kind of side-eyed me. And he was like, is this a trick? I said, no. I want to try this on you. And so I need to know how you're feeling negatively right now. Oh, again, he was very cautious. And he said, Katie, all our lives, you've been telling me to be positive. I'm nervous about telling you about anything negative. I said, that's great. We're going to tap on your nervousness. And so we tapped on it. And that's the piece, is that what I understand is when you think, Cheryl, of the word emotions, a key part of that is motion. And if we have our emotions, and if they don't move through us, they get stuck in an energy blockage. And so having that, giving that ability to move out, and in fact, actually being able to get the positive or get the negative out allows room for the positive to come in. And it's only when we get the negative out that we can then pour in the positive.
Ah, awesome. That sounds great.
Yeah.
So how would it, so you mentioned a little bit earlier, but how do you feel like this is very beneficial for coaches?
Well, I would say it's very beneficial for everyone, but
Yeah.
specifically for coaches. I know as a coach myself that sometimes we deal with negative feelings that we don't want to admit to anyone else. We don't want to admit that we don't feel good enough, or that we don't feel like it's the right time, or that we're not attracting the right clients, or really any negative emotion that you're coming up with. The worry about, am I going to get enough clients to pay my bills? The anxiety about, I wonder if I'm going to actually be able to help this person. The fear of, I don't know what's going to be happening next year. The frustration of dealing with a client who's not paying. The lethargy of, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do anything more. The exhaustion of, how can I do my coaching while I'm doing so many other things, which as a woman we do, right? And ultimately the stress of it all. So all of those waffles can be dissolved using this very simple anti-invasive, anti-narcotic,
Mhm.
anti-addictive, and self-administered technique called tapping.
Yeah. All right. Amazing. I'm ready to try it. So what are we going to
Okay.
do?
So, well, it works best if we have like a specific example. So, is there anything specific that's causing you to be worried, anxious, fearful, frustrated, lethargy, exhausted, or stressed?
Oh, geez.
Just one.
Just one. Yeah. Well, today actually, so I've had a lot of, well, it's been actually for 2 weeks, I want to say, but I've had some technical frustrations and anxieties.
Okay, so and I've talked to a lot of coaches like that. In fact, I was talking to one coach the other day, and I didn't think this particular coach was that old, but the comment was, "I'm too old to learn something new," and I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting concept."
Well, I will say that I did experience tapping, well, a number of years ago when I was in therapy, and it was, I guess it was kind of new or
Yeah,
newish anyway.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so we
yeah.
didn't really keep up with it.
Okay, well, let's just try it. So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions.
Okay.
The most important part, Cheryl, is that we use your words. So if I say something and you're thinking, that's not really true for me, or I would say it a different way, would you please restate it so that I can say it your way?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about, you said it's the technology is the issue, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when was the last time you had technological issues? I think I kind of know the answer to this one.
I was today getting on this call.
Okay, getting on this call. So today, getting on this call, there were technical issues. Now, from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, when you think about those technical challenges, where do you feel it in your body?
I kind of feel a heaviness in my head,
Okay.
and I feel lower backish.
Okay, heaviness in your head and lower backish. Now, from 0 to 10, where 0 is like, no big deal. I have technical issues every day and somehow I get past them. And 10 is the most intense feeling you've had about these technical issues. What number is it?
Well, I'll tell you what, this morning I was at a 10 over a different technical issue. So yeah, I'm
Okay, we'll do that. We'll do that. Now, you mentioned a couple of different emotions. You mentioned anxiety and frustration. What is the emotion when you think about the technical issue this morning that you had that was really big?
frustration.
Frustration. Okay. And and that was at a 10, right?
Yes, that was at a 10.
Okay. So what we're going to do is you can use either hand, right hand or left hand. And with one of the hands, you're going to use your fingers of one hand and tap on the part of your hand of the other hand that's between your pinky finger and your wrist. And you tap right there in the fleshy part of that. And then we're going to say a sentence, a version of the sentence 3 times. And so we'll start there. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, Cheryl. You repeat after me. Even though,
Even though,
when I think about that issue this morning,
when I think about that issue this morning,
oh, there's so much frustration in my head and my lower back.
there's so much frustration in my head and my lower back.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
Is that true?
It is.
Okay, good. And so, even though
Even though
I have that frustration in my head and a heaviness in my head and in my lower back.
Even though I have that heaviness in my head and my lower back.
When I think about that issue this morning with the technology.
When I think about that issue this morning with the technology.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
And then last time, even though just thinking about that issue this morning.
Just thinking about that issue this morning.
Gives me heaviness in my head and frustration in my lower back.
Gives me that heaviness in the head and the frustration in my lower back.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
Right here, right now, I feel safe anyway.
And then on the top of your head, Cheryl, you can use one hand or the other hand or both. It doesn't matter. And you can say, oh, that frustration in my lower back and heaviness in my head.
Oh, that frustration in my lower back and the heaviness in my head.
And then on the edge of your eyebrow, right above your nose, you can say, that heaviness in my head and that frustration in my lower back.
That heaviness in my head and the frustration in my lower back.
And your next point is between your edge of your eye and your hairline. And again, you can use one hand or the other or both. It doesn't matter. And you can say, oh, that frustration in my lower back and that heaviness in my head.
That frustration in my lower back and the heaviness in my head.
And then the next place is right underneath our eyes. That's where I store all my bags, Cheryl. And then you're going to say, oh, that heaviness in my head and that frustration in my lower back.
That heaviness in my head and that frustration in my lower back.
And then under the nose, that frustration in my lower back and that heaviness in my head.
That frustration in my lower back and the heaviness in my head.
And then under the lips, right above your chin, that frustration in my lower back and that heaviness in my head.
That frustration in my lower back and the heaviness in my head.
And then cross your arms and do your collarbones and, oh, that heaviness in my head and that frustration in my back.
The heaviness in my head and the frustration in my back.
And then about 4 inches under your arm, you're going to pat on your ribs. Oh, that heaviness in my head and that frustration in my back.
That heaviness in my head and the frustration in my back.
And then Cheryl, blow all your air out.
Actually, that feels really good. That feels better. I like it.
So Cheryl, when you think about that issue this morning with technology from 0 to 10, where is it now?
Probably like a 5. Maybe a 6, but 5, between 5 and 6, definitely reduced. Definitely.
So all you do is repeat that again and again until it gets to a 0. Clinical studies have shown when they compare this process with cognitive behavior therapy, EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, and then EFT, emotional freedom technique or tapping, that EFT and EMDR are way more effective than cognitive behavior therapy. The difference is with EMDR, you've got to be sitting there with the therapist in case you go into a trauma response, right? Mm-hmm. But with tapping, you can do it with a practitioner like me, or you can do it yourself. And the difference is I probably will ask you questions that you would never ask yourself. And so it goes a little faster that way. Yeah,
that reminds me of trying to coach ourselves.
Right.
We need a coach.
You need a coach. Coaches. Yeah. And I never hire a coach until I find out who they're working with right now as their coach. Yeah.
No, I hear that. So why do we bring up the negative? Why
do we bring up? Well, because the negative stuck in somewhere in one of our energy pathways. And because it's stuck, it's causing a disturbance, and that disturbance is keeping us from making quality decisions, from being able to focus, from being able to think clearly, because all our energy is being focused on that. When we have a negative reaction to something, Cheryl, our amygdala says, okay, you're not safe, and I'm going to keep you safe. And so it hijacks our system. And have you heard of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response? And so it puts your body in that mode. And when you're in that mode, you get no oxygen to the brain. And with no oxygen to the brain, you cannot think. And because you can't think, you cannot make good decisions. Your mind is focused on, that thing that happened this morning with technology. Well, blah, 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 blah.
Right. Well, that's a little clearer.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
the blah, blah, blah part.
Yeah. So how do you use this in your practice?
So Cheryl, what I do is when clients come to me and they want assistance, they fill out an intake form, and then we work out 3 1-hour sessions, and we work on 3 1-hour sessions. Usually 3 1-hour sessions usually knocks out that one issue. Now, I will say that we have limiting beliefs, and that we have different aspects of the limiting beliefs that support them. Have you ever bought a car, and as you're driving down the street, it's like, I had no idea everybody in town had a car just like mine, right? So if that's your aspects that are supporting your limiting beliefs. So we may have a limiting belief that I don't know where my clients are going to come from, right? Mm-hmm. And every time somebody says something, every time I read something, my eyes go straight to, my ears listen. I find things that support that limiting belief. Well, what happens is as we tap away and we get, for instance, the frustration of the technical issue, once we get that to 0, then the concern about technical issues just kind of drops. So we may not have to clear every aspect. We just need to clear enough aspects where the limiting belief goes away. For instance, I had a client, Cheryl, who had a fear of spiders. Great big, tall, military officer. And he came in and he's like, I got this fear of spiders. I'm like, okay, so what is it about spiders? He said, I hate walking into their webs. I'm like, okay, we can do that. So we cleared it, and he had no more fear about walking to his webs. So I saw him a couple weeks later, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And he's like, I hate spiders. I said, wait a minute. We cleared that part. I said, what about walking into the webs? He's like, oh, I have no fear about that at all. He said, I just hate the way they crawl and everything. So that's another aspect, right, of spiders. And just like people have a fear of flying, so they may have a fear of flying, and different people have different aspects. So your waffles may have different batter. So your batter may be the frustration with technology is because it costs you time, money, effort. Somebody else's battle with technology may be that they're overwhelmed and they don't feel like they can learn something. Somebody else's battle with technology may be that they don't feel like they have enough technology. So, everybody's batter is different.
Yeah, amazing. And you do this remotely, like through Zoom or?
Oh, I've been on Zoom years before we talked about COVID. It's hard for me to have my clients overseas without it. Yeah. So I've had clients in Spain and in Belgium and Canada and all over the United States. I'm in Florida right now. I actually work full time, and then I do this on the side as well as speak. And so.
Yeah. All right. Amazing.
Yeah.
So do you do groups as well, or is it just one-on-one?
I actually do presentations to groups. As it turns out, what they say in tapping is the more specific, the more terrific. So when I do in groups, and I have done groups, I've actually got a group session in 2 days from now where I'm working with a group. But what I'll do is I'll pick one person and we work on one issue for that one person. And then I ask everybody else in the group to tap along with us, even though that may not be their issue and it may not be on their body in that same spot, and it may not be at that intensity, because there's actually a benefit called borrowing benefits, where just like I'm hoping your constituents have tapped along with you, that they may feel relief, even though they may not have an issue with technology or something, but it's just the process of tapping along can actually help people.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's, you have a free gift for my listeners.
Yes, all your listeners have to do is contact me at hello@drnall.com. That's HELLO@DRNALL.com. And I'm happy to give them a 20-minute introduction session like this. You'd be surprised at what we can accomplish in 20 minutes. So I'm happy to offer that to your group.
Awesome. And then we're going to have a link in the show notes for a demonstration on YouTube. correct?
Yeah, yeah. I have a silent demonstration on my YouTube channel, which is Katie Nall, Ph.D. On the YouTube channel. And there's lots of demonstrations. I've done this with some hosts, Cheryl, that they were so taken aback by the results that they were speechless. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to take over the show now for a few minutes while they regroup.
Amazing. All right.
Right.
And you also have you have a product starting, or a group starting in November. Tell us about that.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I appreciate you bringing it up. A friend had, and actually she was a client. She's been a client for 2 years, and she came to me and she's like, Katie, I've got this 40-day prosperity plan. You want to try it? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And, whatever. And it was journaling for 8 minutes a day, right? And so we both journaled 8 minutes a day, and the results were astounding. She actually is a full-time entrepreneur. In those 40 days, she doubled her sustainable monthly income, doubled. And I'm an employee, so I'm like, what's it going to do for me? But at the end of 40 days, Cheryl, unsolicited, I end up receiving about $10,000. Now, for you and others, $10,000 may not be a big deal, but for me, it was huge.
I'm sure it's a big deal for all of my listeners. Yeah.
To get unsolicited and $10,000. So we started this mastermind based on this. So we do the journaling, we do daily accountability, we have networking. So a lot of people are getting clients back and forth because of this. And we also twice a week do tapping. And that's individualized. And so the session that starts on November 4th will be our third cohort that we've gotten started. And the results have been mind-blowing. We've had everywhere from people who are growing into themselves, being able to accept the fact that they can say no and not feel guilty. We've had people who have been able to grow into the fact that they are enough in themselves. We had one participant who was able to give a couple of talks, and from those talks, she says her inbox blew up, and she had 81 responses to a talk that she had where people, they didn't even ask. They just said, we want to book you, just tell us your fee. We had one lady who came to one of the classes, and she's like, well, I was able to accomplish my dream. And we're like, what was your dream? We didn't even know what it was. And she said, oh, I was able to buy that oceanfront property in Nicaragua. What are you talking about? Oh, apparently her mother was extremely wealthy. And so she'd been coordinating with her mother to be able to buy this property that she had wanted in Nicaragua. And relations broke off with her mother. And so there was that to deal with, which that's a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then she's like, but her heart was set on this property. So she was able to think clearly, came up with a solution, went back to the owner and said, I have this to propose. And the owner said, actually, that's a much better solution. We will take that. So people are able to think clear. They are able to network. They have seen amazing results.
Awesome. So how can they find out more about that program? Is it on your website, or?
It's on my website under events, or I have a direct link I can share with you.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll put that into the show notes as well.
Thank you so much.
So what, kind of like to wrap this up, what is something that you would say to our listeners that are, kind of curious about it?
So I would tell them that stress is natural. Holding on to stress is not natural, and that there are ways that they can release the stress and live a fuller, better life with fewer disruptions and so much more peace. And that's what I wish for all of your people in your group.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for being on the show today. I appreciate you taking the time out.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And thank you guys for listening in, and I'll see you on the next episode of Master Your Coaching Biz. Bye-bye.